Some of the most controversial movies ever made happen to be set during World War II. There's a film so graphic, critics literally ran out of the theater. Another got buried by the Pentagon because it showed a soldier executed by his own country, and one pissed off the entire Polish government. These are the films Hollywood doesn't really want to talk about, the ones protested, censored, banned, even completely erased from history. This made-for-TV film starred Martin Sheen as Eddie Slovik, the only American soldier executed for desertion since the Civil War. In real life, Slovik was a guy barely out of prison trying to straighten his life out. He got married, settled down, thought he avoided the draft because he had a criminal record. But the draft rules changed, he got sent to boot camp, and instantly it was clear he had zero business being there. Still, they pushed him through training, sent him to the front line, and he just couldn't handle it. Eventually, he deserted. And that ended tragically. This story was radioactive for decades. Frank Sinatra originally tried making it back in the 60s, but he got slammed hard by military brass and politicians, straight up accused of being a communist sympathizer even. Sinatra had to back down. Eventually, it got made in 1974, but even then this movie was so controversial, the Pentagon refused any cooperation. The government never officially banned it, but they buried it anyway. NBC aired it exactly once, then basically locked it away for years. Spike Lee's ambitious World War II drama was supposed to honor the often overlooked African-American soldiers who fought in Italy, but instead it ended up seriously offending the Italians. The movie dramatizes the 1944 St. Anna massacre, where hundreds of Italian civilians were murdered by the SS, but the film made the controversial choice of blaming a local Italian resistance fighter for triggering it. Italian historians and veterans were furious because a 2005 military tribunal had already proven the massacre was purely a Nazi atrocity, planned way ahead of time. Survivors even publicly protested against Spike Lee, saying the movie rewrote their history. Lee flat out refused to apologize. He said openly, "I am not apologizing for anything." Italians still have a lot about their history during the war to come to grips with. Miracle bombed at the box office, got slammed by critics, and ultimately ended up as one of those movies that tried doing something meaningful, but just ended up offending people instead. Directed by Cornell Wilde, this war film about U.S. Marines invading a Japanese-held island was insanely controversial when it came out. Mainly because it was one of the first World War II films to show graphic battlefield gore. Dismemberments, soldiers horribly injured, blood everywhere, stuff nobody was ready for in the late 60s. One scene in particular where a soldier gets his arm blown off and actually picks it back up created massive outrage. Critics freaked out, censors panicked, and even the Catholic Legion of Decency straight up condemned it as excessively brutal. The U.S. Marines initially offered support but backed out completely when they saw just how grim and cynical the tone was. Some theaters even edited scenes or slapped age restrictions on it. Ironically, 30 years later, Saving Private Ryan's opening scene did similar gore, and audiences barely blinked. But back in 1967, that level of graphic violence was completely unheard of and caused a massive scandal. Even before it started filming, Valkyrie, a movie about the 1944 plot to assassinate Hitler, was stirring controversy in Germany. Tom Cruise was cast as Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, and German officials absolutely hated this idea because Cruise was a Scientologist. Scientology is hugely controversial in Germany, seen as basically a cult. Stauffenberg's own family publicly objected to Cruise playing him, and German defense officials initially blocked the movie from filming at real military locations. When it premiered in New York, they even had to screen it privately inside the Time Warner Center to avoid Scientology protesters waiting outside. Historians were actually impressed by the accuracy. Peter Hoffmann, a major expert on German resistance against Hitler, consulted for the filmmakers and confirmed it was mostly accurate. Sure, a few liberties were taken for Hollywood, but overall it was respectful and historically legit. But none of that stopped people from getting upset. Just casting Cruise alone sparked enough outrage to make this film infamous before anyone even saw it. You might remember U-571, a World War II movie that gave Americans credit for cracking Nazi codes. Didn't sit well at all. Well, the Brits came along with their own code-breaking thriller called Enigma, starring Kate Winslet. This time, all the credit went straight to British intelligence, and Poland wasn't having it. Right after Enigma came out, the Polish embassy in London straight up protested the movie because it basically erased Poland's huge role in breaking Enigma. Even worse, the film invented a Polish traitor, a spy character secretly working with the Nazis at Bletchley Park. Poland government said this was basically slander. They even released a formal statement correcting the historical record and pointed out that no Polish officers even worked at Bletchley Park at all. The one real-life spy we know of there was actually British, a guy named John Cairncross, who passed secrets to the Soviets. Historian Norman Davies joined the controversy, calling out the film for barely mentioning Poland's contributions while putting all the attention on a completely fictional Polish villain. Poland's embassy summed it up pretty clearly. This is a gratuitous slur on Poles who fought side by side with their British allies. Pretty big diplomatic mess for a war thriller. Here's a movie that literally had audiences running for the exits. Critics, too. The Painted Bird is a super grim World War II drama, incredibly graphic, brutally violent. When it premiered at Venice, people walked out in droves. One viewer even tripped and fell down the stairs trying to get away from the screen. Newspapers had an absolute field day. The Sun described people actually brawling in panic to escape the theater. The Daily Mail called it a panoply of depravity. The Guardian reported viewers literally falling over each other at the first screening, especially during this insanely graphic scene where someone's eyes get gouged out with a spoon. Somewhat similar to Come and See, this movie follows an abandoned young boy wandering across Eastern Europe during the Nazi occupation. Total nightmare landscape. Murder, torture, mutilation, 3 hours of relentless brutality, and critics called it the most controversial film of the year. But here's the weird thing. For all the horrors on screen, the film is visually stunning. Beautiful cinematography, unforgettable visuals. Critics who did manage to stick it out actually praised its artistry, saying it genuinely captured human evil. This war action starring Daniel Craig caused absolute outrage when it opened in Poland. It's based on a true story about the Bielski brothers, Jewish partisans who resisted the Nazis in Belarus during World War II. Problem was, many in Poland accused the movie of whitewashing history, ignoring crimes allegedly committed against Polish civilians by some Jewish Soviet partisan groups. The backlash got pretty extreme. Polish audiences actually booed and shouted down screenings. Some theaters pulled the movie completely. Major conservative newspapers ran headlines calling the Bielskis bandits and accused the film of being anti-Polish propaganda. And yeah, it got ugly. Anti-Semitic commentary started popping up in the media as the controversy exploded. Even Nahama Tek, a Holocaust survivor who wrote the book the movie is based on, admitted she was shocked by some scenes, like big dramatic battles against German tanks, which she says never really happened. Tek explained those scenes as Hollywood demands to make the film more thrilling and secure funding. But in Poland, none of that mattered. The film was basically seen as an insult, booed and banned in multiple towns. Another war film controversy, this time in Greece. Nicolas Cage starred in a war drama based on a popular novel, but the original book had really angered local veterans and former Greek resistance fighters. The movie depicted Greek communist partisans as cruel, traitorous villains, something many Greeks considered straight-up offensive. So when news broke that Hollywood was coming to Cephalonia to film it, locals were absolutely furious. One resistance fighter who spent decades in prison for his work during the war called the book an outright insult to the whole Greek people and said it was part of some bigger attempt to rewrite history. Eventually, Greek authorities stepped in. They formed a committee to vet the movie script, forced the filmmakers to tone down the most offensive parts. They cut out a controversial assault scene, added bits showing Greek partisans actually fighting against Germans. But even after all that, historians still criticize the movie for historical whitewashing, and audiences pretty much hated it anyway. It bombed at the box office and got terrible reviews, 28% on Rotten Tomatoes.